Hello, everyone. My name is Ian Hamilton, Senior Policy Advisor at CEDA. It's my pleasure to be hosting today's live stream. The topic for today is building cyber resilience in Australia's critical services, where we will discuss how Australia's critical assets and services are dealing with cyber threat ahead of our annual State of the Nation 2022 conference. CEDA acknowledges that today and every day we are on Aboriginal land. Committed to recognition and reconciliation, we respect elders and we support their stated aspirations. Today, I'm joining you from Melbourne on the land of the Boorong people of the Kulin Nation. I'd like to thank our live stream sponsor for today, ALDA. Your ongoing support allows CEDA to continue to convene conversations on key policy issues. I'd like to welcome our viewers joining us from around the country and extend a special welcome to our panellists. Joining me in the conversation today, Rosemary Sinclair, AM, Chief Executive Officer of ALDA, and Gijo Varghese, responsible for information security and cyber resilience at Endeavour Energy. Today, as at all CEDA events, you can interact through our Q&A portal, which is available via the link on your screen. Or you can enter in the details by going to ceda.pigeonhole.at and using the passcode Cyber Resilience. Post your own questions and vote on the questions by others. You can put forward your questions at any time and we'll endeavour to answer as many as possible. You can also join the conversation on Twitter by using today's hashtag, which is Cyber Resilience, and tagging @CEDA_news. Cyber resilience is paramount to establishing Australia as a leading digital nation and ensuring our critical assets, organisations, institutions and services are properly safeguarded. With the appointment of a Minister for Cybersecurity in Claire O'Neill, it is the first time Australia has had its own cybersecurity portfolio on the Cabinet. This escalation of priority mirrors the escalation of risks of cybersecurity in our economy. The statistics for Australian businesses and government are stark. Cybercrime costs the Australian economy $33 billion per year, and the 2021 financial year saw 1/4 of reported cyber incidences associated with critical infrastructure, such as essential services like transport and logistics, electricity, communications, and health. Cyber threats are part of the business environment now and do not adhere to national borders. In a speech in March this year, the now PM Anthony Albanese argued that recognising that sovereign domestic data security is a modern foundation of national security. He noted that offshore data storage had implications for sovereignty and security, and that some types of data could only be appropriately secured if it were mandated that it be kept in Australia. It is clear that the Australian government intends to continue to develop its domestic capabilities in cybersecurity and increase resilience in critical infrastructure to counter threats, while also building broad-based, proactive and long-term multinational partnerships with like-minded countries, as we've seen this week with the continued engagement with NATO. This live stream is the first of 2 sessions under CEDA's flagship State of the Nation program that will examine the critical choices ahead for Australian businesses, policymakers and diplomats, as cybersecurity threats impact every aspect of Australian life. The second session will take place on Thursday, the 8th of September in Canberra as part of the State of the Nation conference, and I hope to see you all there. We'll start the panel discussion by asking each of our panelists about the cybersecurity environment of their respective organisations. You both represent organisations with very different operational environments. Rosemary, having a website is ubiquitous in commerce, and ALDA maintains our .au country code, which is considered part of Australia's critical infrastructure. Where is ALDA feeling the challenges in cybersecurity now?
Look, at multiple levels, and I just want to take a moment, Ian, to go to your point that having a website is ubiquitous. Having an email address is also ubiquitous. So what we take care of is anything that ends in a .au, whether it's a website or an email address. And of course, during the pandemic, we've all come to absolutely appreciate the importance of our digital lives, our digital working environment. During the pandemic, we saw more than 200,000 Australian small businesses that had never thought they needed a website jump into the domain name system. So we do see ourselves as critical underpinning for Australia's economy economy and society. And where we're really focused is making sure that the system itself is as secure as it possibly can be, using international standards and working across our whole supply chain. So interconnectedness is a really important part of this discussion. And we're also working to support small businesses and individuals to become cybersecurity aware and to be confident in their use of the new systems. So it's a multi-pronged approach to building this capability for our whole country.
Great, thanks, Rosemary. And we'll touch on the building resilience a bit later. I'll just throw to Gijo. Energy access supports all aspects of Australian life, including underpinning the operation of other critical infrastructure. What cybersecurity challenges have you experienced in 2022 in protecting your assets?
Thanks, Ian, and good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, you're right, Ian. Electricity is a vital element to all Australians and Australian economy because of its dependency for almost everybody, household consumers like you and me and businesses alike. Therefore, Endeavour Energy understands as a distributor that criticality and dependency, and hence we strive to provide our consumers with safe and reliable supply of electricity. This year in 2022, we've seen sophisticated attacks targeting our staff, technology ecosystems, and suppliers. Cyber attacks are becoming multidimensional and complex, as Rosemary just reiterated. But today, I'll be talking about 3 cyber challenges in our industry that has been around people, supply chain, and technology vulnerabilities. I'll try to detail each of these dimensions with data and examples where possible. So the number one challenge that we've had to respond is responding to targeted phishing attacks on our staff and contractors. People have always been the weakest link in cybersecurity and still are. If you break down the anatomy of cyber attacks, 90% of attacks would start with a simple phishing email. And this is because cyber criminals know that they only need to compromise one staff to gain access into an organization's network or system. As a result, my team spends considerable time in building cybersecurity awareness amongst our staff and enable elements like multi-factor authentication so staff can be our human firewall of our network and real defenders. The second challenge is the increase in supply chain attacks. If you've read the CrowdStrike Global Security Survey in 2021, it's identified that supply chain attacks are raising approximately 430% year on year. And this is because enterprises are now hardening their technology environment, and malicious attackers have turned on to softer targets like trusted third-party vendors, and vendors who offer technology services and software. A classic example of this attack is the SolarWinds software compromise that the Russian attackers or Russian hackers did to gain access into sensitive systems of targeted organizations. Last but not the least, my third top challenge is the convergence of information and operational technology networks in critical infrastructure entities. The explosion of what we call the hyperconnectivity model is increasing the attack surface and is exposing our operational technology assets to adversaries. Previously, operational technology systems, or OT systems, which we call, were always in a restricted and air-gapped network. But now, because of the connectivity and convergence, we see the operational technology talking to or connecting to information technology or corporate networks. As a result, there is a need for us to uplift the operational technology security capability and bring it to a level of our information technology networks. So, in this, digital and technology era, Ian, there is a need for us to consider a holistic resiliency framework, which includes cybersecurity controls around people, technology, supply chain, so we can protect critical infrastructure and enable and provide a reliable supply of electricity to our citizens and business.
Great, thank you, Gijo. That's really a good summary of to get the ball rolling of the state of play. And I'll just take a question from Pigeonhole to start with, just to really again set the scene and ask Rosemary, how regulated are cybersecurity standards in Australia, and how do you think we compare globally?
Thanks, Ian. That's a really important question, and it goes to the point that Gijo was just making, that we can't actually solve this problem in Australia. We have to see ourselves as part of an international network and international economy. So we have very secure and good standards in Australia, such as the Australian Signal Directorate's Essential 8. That's a very good set of standards that can really be used by all businesses in a fit-for-purpose way. And then at AUDA, we adopt the international standards. So the ISO 27001 Information Security Standard. We always head in the direction of the international standards as the benchmark. We adopt those ourselves. And to Gijo's point, we require the adoption of those standards by our supply chain partners. So our registry operator and our registrars in the contracts that we have with those organisations, we require that they adopt those standards. So standards-wise, I think we're in a pretty good place. It's the implementation and the continuous adoption and testing and training. That's where we all need to focus our attention. It's not the first tick against the ISO standards or the ASD standards that matter. It's the continual adoption and improvement that is the task ahead of us.
Great, thanks, Rosemary. And I just thought I'd throw to Gijo. You talk about people risks here, and how is COVID and remote working, how has that added to, you spoke to air gapping and risks there. How have you had to grapple with that the past 2 years?
Yeah, and look, COVID has thrown a new dimension to the cybersecurity world. Amongst all the other issues that we've had, the new dimension was that we had to let our systems that were designed initially to be within a perimeter, move away from that to be connected from remote environments directly to internet. And what it means is, a normal staff who was working in the office now works from home and is connected directly to internet, which means that the system is exposed to adversaries, and good people. And that's a dimensional change to what we had from a traditional security model that we've always established. And in 2 years' time, we had to kind of recoup, redesign our structures to eliminate that risk off. And there's been a lot of new standards, technology that's come in to enable secure remote connectivity. And I think the cybersecurity professionals have been very busy deploying that. The second dimension is with the remote connectivity, the cyber criminals have seen an opportunity to kind of exploit and run some sophisticated phishing attacks. We've seen phishing attacks that are very sophisticated, and social engineering attacks to initially gain passwords so they can get into the environment, and then laterally move into the network and deploy ransomware tools which literally cripples organization. So there's been a massive change in the ecosystem, Ian.
Great, thank you. And Rosemary, you touched on the 200,000 small businesses that had to start engaging in the digital space. And if I assume they didn't have digital teams to support them. So on the other end of the sophistication, how's your organisation felt the interface with those businesses looking to become digital?
Yeah, we start, of course, with the fact that the Australian economy is heavily dependent on small businesses. The vast majority of Australians are employed by small businesses. And so the digital capability of those businesses is critical to the success of our whole economy. And we do an annual survey, we call it the Digital Lives of Australians, and we look at households and small businesses. And what we found in that survey is that a significant proportion of Australian consumers are concerned about cybersecurity, but a significant minority, only around 25% of Australian small businesses have cybersecurity practices in place. So there's a lot of work for all of us to do in terms of uplift of cybersecurity capability and resilience throughout small businesses in Australia. It's not that we haven't done this before. I mean, if you think about issues such as workplace health and safety, right, there was a time where people really didn't know what their responsibilities were, and, workplace accidents were not really analysed and thought about. Over a number of years, we've built workplaces now where everybody understands their responsibilities and what to do about that issue. I would say the same in terms of the environment. That wasn't a thing 25 years ago, but now in all of our workplaces and businesses, people are adopting environment and climate change resilience practices. So we're at the beginning of this journey about cybersecurity, but I'm really confident, because people have identified the problem, if we can start communicating about the solutions and providing the tools, then we can bring people on the journey. One tool that we have been supporting is the development by the Australian Security Policy Institute of a little tool called AU Check. So a website or an email address, you can run this little tool for free, and it will give you a short report which can be used as the beginning of a conversation with whoever it is that comes to install your computers or repair your software. The people you talk to about IT things, you can use this to start a conversation about how to improve my cybersecurity. So that's one contribution, Ian, that we're making to try and help this huge project that's ahead of us.
Yeah, I agree with that, Rosemary. Cyber resiliency is critical to any business operations, and it's becoming fundamental building block of the digital era. Therefore, and I totally agree that organizations need to uplift their cybersecurity maturity to provide reliability services to their citizens and consumers. If you look at the geopolitical event in Europe, and Russia invaded Ukraine, it inevitably we could see the cyber attacks started much before the invasion itself. And what we learned from that particular episode is cyber attacks are not going away soon. It's going to turn into proxy wars and cyber warfare. And Russia essentially targeted electricity networks, telecommunication networks, nuclear stations and hospitals, and even rehabilitation centers of neighboring countries. Gone are those days when cybersecurity was just an IT problem of an organization. It's now become a business risk, and also has potential impacts to Australian economy. So resiliency is becoming necessary. And I think government is going in the right direction by putting measures to make sure that resiliency for our essential services.
So I just thought I'd follow up on that. So there's that comment of, in the last 2 years, has there been an increase, I guess, in the type of targets or the sophistication of attacks that you've been dealing with?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Look, I personally think there's been an increased target in specific sectors and verticals of industry. We've seen, adversary attacks and attacks coming in from high-risk countries on pharmaceutical and research companies. During these COVID days, what we have seen is there's been increased research on COVID medicines and vaccines, and we've seen high-scale, sophisticated attacks on research institutes who are developing vaccines, to get that competitive advantage. So that's one set of cyber criminals, but also you have to note that while there was COVID, a lot of people lost their job. And they had time. Some of them who even turned into cyber criminal activities because that was opportunistic to kind of attack and gain some money. So there's been different type of threat actors in the environment in the last 2 years, and they have kind of heightened the attack layout and vectors in the recent past.
And if I could perhaps just add a comment there, Ian, from where we sit, what we've seen in terms of the way in for the bad actors is an increase in the use of hacking of small business websites. So whereas people thought the problem was that the bad actors would maliciously register a domain name and set up an operation, from the get-go for the purpose of malicious behaviour, what we're finding is that the hacking of small business websites and the misuse of people's reputation for phishing and malware and so on attacks, that has been on the increase. Our response to that has been to be auditing and taking action within proper powers to deal with that. But I just want to perhaps share a little moment of sunshine, because it's very easy to get very, very worried about this. The performance in Australia of what we call DNS abuse is we are very well below the global average. So of the 3.6 million domain names in .au, only 0.04 of them are causing domain abuse problems, whereas the global average is 0.3% of domain names. So we're ever vigilant, and our vigilance is producing results, good results. But that's the point. We need to remain ever vigilant because of the environment that Gijo has just described.
Right. Rosemary, I might just touch on a sort of a follow-on there. It sounds as if you'd almost say that the Australian.au is a sort of a brand of safety, like a global one that you could link that to. And do you think that has like economic advantages for Australian companies?
Absolutely, and we test this in terms of the credibility of .au domain names, and it's very, very high amongst Australian and other consumers. It's high because of the way we run the .au domain name system. We're very, very concerned about security and stability. We're concerned to validate people who come into the Australian domain name system. There are a range of policies and technical platform management issues that we adopt that make this a secure domain, and consumers recognise it. The advantage, of course, not only for the consumers but for the users of domain names in .au is because consumers have confidence, they are willing to transact online. And that means growth in markets, it means the ability to innovate, it means the ability to communicate. So it's very, very important for our economy, but increasingly for our society. We all learned new ways to communicate during the pandemic, and we've recently introduced a new namespace, .au Direct, and we're seeing really good take-up of that namespace by community groups, by micro-entrepreneurs, and that's because they have confidence in the .au domain, and the users of the .au domain have confidence. So it's a win-win.
Oh, great. And I might just pivot slightly over to Gijo. I just wanted to ask you about the attacks that you feel on your network, and I guess your colleagues feel. Do you believe they're primarily state actors or non-state actors?
Well, we see different type of hacktivists in the wild. We see state-sponsored attacks, and we see state-sponsored attacks specifically when there are geopolitical tensions. For example, when we release a statement, and our Prime Minister releases a statement, and that's not particularly accepted by a high-risk country, we see scanning and reconnaissance happening in our perimeter. When we had the Russian invasion to Ukraine, we saw a flurry of activity in the internet, specifically having a lot of reconnaissance on our border systems. So we see that specifically during geopolitical tensions, but quite often we also see petty cyber criminals looking to get into the network to carry out a ransomware attack so they can get some money. There's also attempts that we see where our staff are victimized by sophisticated phishing attacks. And quite often, they could also be very targeted attack because they think that they have specific financial delegations in the business, or that they have a specific privilege in terms of administration of systems in our environment. But also we see kids trying out unique vulnerability and exploiting that. So we kind of are very vigilant in all of this and investigate them as if it's a real attack on our environment, and learn from those incidences and put mitigation controls in place if there's any.
Great, thank you. And so we've talked a lot about, I guess, the threats, and I wanted to drill back to the Australian context and the government. The Critical Infrastructure Bill was passed in late November, and it imposes new security obligations on owners and operators of entities of critical infrastructure. We have a new government in power, but this bill was also a bipartisan support bill. Is the messaging from government counterparts that this program of cyber resilience is to continue? And I might turn to Rosemary first.
Yes, I think we're seeing the beginning with this legislation of a very important and long-term body of work to build cybersecurity resilience and capability in Australia. I think the approach, the security of critical infrastructure legislation, the approach in that legislation of identifying the critical sectors in Australia, working with those sectors to understand their assets, their risks, their response capability, to build a communications and coordination coalition, if you like, of people working together. In some senses, people could say the consultation at the beginning of this process was a bit patchy. I think that would be a fair statement. But as we work through the risks and the rules and the asset register, it seems to me that the consultation is getting better and better, and trusted relationships. And this is the key. It's the trusted relationships that will be the answer to this problem. Those relationships are being built through these processes. And in our particular circumstance, of course, it's not only local relationships, it's international relationships. The internet is the most marvellous, messy, chaotic, open network. It's a global open network, and its value to all of us is just that it's global and open. And we have to resist the urge to shut down and put up sovereign borders, and we have to work hard on the harder challenge of building cybersecurity capability and resilience. So I'm seeing really terrific progress in building those relationships, in building respect for the role that private sector can play, that government can play. We've made tremendous progress in the last couple of years.
Great, thanks, Rosemary. And I'll throw to Gijo. Do you have
Yeah, of course. Yes, I agree with Rosemary. Cyber resilience is critical for not only business operations, but it is a fundamental building block for the digital Australia, and therefore there is a need for cyber resiliency to be considered because there are state actors, cyber criminals who are constantly prodding, testing, the state of network of businesses. And gone are those days when cybersecurity was just an IT problem in an organization. It's now become more an economic problem for businesses. And I see a lot of positive progress with this SOCI Act. We already have started seeing threat intelligence being exchanged by private sectors and government organizations. Also, through this regulation, bodies like ACSC, the Australian Cybersecurity Centre, is starting to support Australian businesses in responding, recovering, and rebuilding in some instances after cyber attack, which is a great start. I still think there is a lot of work to be done. There are challenges in the speed of support and the agility of response of incidences. And I think that's where businesses need to invest in security, protection, hardening, and detection capabilities, so their businesses can be resilient irrespective of what the threat is.
Great. And just a follow-up on that, if the speed is building for the response by government, are there other international, something overseas that you feel that we could mirror or take example from, Gijo? And then I'll throw to Rosemary for the same question.
I think there is multiple learnings here. Cybersecurity incidences, which specifically, cross-border incidences cannot be kind of controlled by one country. There needs to be a larger collaboration between ACSC and other, peak cybersecurity government organizations like NCSC in UK, the CISA in USA, and also the CERT from New Zealand. I think there is a larger collaboration that is required, and there is a need for exchanging threat intelligence of what is happening in specific industry verticals, so that can be kind of communicated to businesses, and so businesses can be alerted on such specific set of intelligence and respond better. So I think there is a need to have that collaborative threat intelligent communication and collaboration amongst cross-border organizations nationally.
Yes, and I would agree with that. And I think we've seen much more emphasis in recent times on international cooperation and coalition building. It's, there's heavy emphasis on the geopolitical risk of nation states operating independently. But it seems to me the response to that has been like-minded nation states coming together in a range of different fora, trade, military, information gathering. In the internet world, there's a very interesting example of collaboration, not only between governments or between private sector industry bodies and associations, but between all of those. And it's given a special name. It's called the multi-stakeholder model of internet governance. What that really means is that you get government, private sector organisations, civil society organisations, technical and academic specialists all coming together to develop policies for the coordination and operation of the internet. That was done from the earliest days of the internet quite deliberately, so that the internet was decentralised in terms of technology, but was also decentralised in terms of policy decision-making. And we've had a really interesting example back to the reality of geopolitics. There is, if you go to the ICANN website, ICANN being the global coordinating body, the catalyst body, there's the transparent discussion in response to a question from representatives of the Ukrainian government about whether Russia should be part of the global internet. The request is transparent. The response is transparent. And it's the best and most significant demonstration of the value of the multi-stakeholder model. This is all out in the open. And the conclusion is that an open, interoperable global internet is better for the users of the internet than an internet where we start sort of chopping bits out. Even though there are difficulties, it's better for us to address the difficulties than start chopping the internet into little closed splinter nets, if you like. So that model of government, private sector, technical experts and civil society, importantly civil society, coming together to wrestle with these problems, I think that's a really important model for how we should deal with cybersecurity resilience.
Great, thank you, because that touches on the complexity of the model, and then you're in response to have a networked multi-party model there. That's I just thought there's a upcoming update to the 2016 cybersecurity strategy by the Australian government, and just reflecting on, I guess, the changing environment. Lots have changed in, I think, is that 6 years since the last update. Do you think, are there ways that this update, would the focus be on this putting the international and network governance approach in the forefront, Rosemary?
Yeah, I think there's a very good opportunity for the Australian government to reaffirm its commitment to the multi-stakeholder model. That commitment is loud and proud. But in these times, I think an opportunity to just reaffirm that commitment, that it's best if we all work together on this problem is really a critical part of the reconsideration and updating of that strategy. I think the fact that we have a cabinet minister for cybersecurity is really an excellent step in the right direction, and to support the strategy with that kind of structure in place so that there is, clear accountability, which is not to say that that person has the only accountability, but, strategy, structure. Then I think the other issue for me is just how we really work to improve the cyber resilience and capability of small business. And we've got, if you like, a lot of people shouting at small business. Small business is very busy. And it's about individuals. I think we've got to do some work on how to get those messages through in a more digestible and actionable way. Thanks.
Yeah, I think, if you look at the geopolitical threat environment, specifically with the Russian invasion to Ukraine, cyber warfare is here to stay. This is probably the first recorded invasion where there was digital fighting before the kinetic fighting, and cyber warfare in a peacetime could be used for proxy wars between two countries to just show strategic power, or even pass disinformation to citizens, or maybe even it's used for as a prelude to military injections. So there is a need for Australia to build a strategy that first of all, enables a pathway to the digital era in having a capability to support Australian businesses first of all. So I think there is a need for Australian government organization to be funded to build that capability to monitor the environment, build an effective threat intelligence capability, and carry out incident response to smaller businesses and critical infrastructure. Very similarly, there should also be investment in the strategy to train people, because workforce, in cybersecurity is of a big shortage, and I guess there needs to be investment and incentives made for institutes to provide training, so we can have localized resources and we don't have to have dependency on migrant workers on cybersecurity. But also, I think there needs to be investment, like Rosemary said, on smaller businesses, so they can be supported in maturing their cybersecurity processes, and also have a robust response capability within them. So there is there's no dependency on government every time.
Well, that's great. Thanks, Gijo. You must have the same notes as me, because I was just about to ask about how businesses can build their own skills and capability. Rosemary, how is your organisation rising to, I guess, the skill shortage, the resilience, as Gijo has touched on, requires people? How are you in that, I guess, the battle for people at the moment?
Yes, and I think we're just one example of Australian small business, really facing quite a problem in terms of skills shortages. I think part of our response is to be realistic, because it's not only skills shortage. Because there's skills shortage, the people that you've got become fatigued, and we're not out of COVID yet. So people are still coming down with COVID. So there's, uncertainty about the amount of resource. So we're taking great care of our people. We're putting a lot of effort into training all our other people. So we kind of, if you like, we have the 4 P's in terms of our concern about our own cybersecurity response. So passwords, we pay a lot of attention to passwords. So that would be one. The second is we pay a lot of attention to training. So we do monthly training, and then our IT people do little tests for us. So we're, very vigilant about making sure that our people are not our weakest link. We're very on our game in terms of patching software and keeping all our software up to date. And then, as I said earlier, we're also very mindful about our third-party capability. So we're, looking for additional resources, but we're also keeping the resources that we have right up to the top level of skill as a way of getting through this period. But it's a time for really being careful with resources and realistic about timeframes and projects.
Great. Well, thank you. I just think we've covered a lot of themes there, and I think I was just looking back to the Australian environment, the changes that government are doing, the international environment and rising threats. this conversation is going to continue in Canberra in a couple of months' time. I'd just quickly ask both of you that if you were to take one thing, there's a lot of things we've discussed. If you were to take one thing for the Minister for Cybersecurity, what's your one on the list? And I might throw to Gijo first.
I think for me, the one would be that, the SOCI Act has triggered maturity of cybersecurity to be implemented across 12, industry verticals. And if you accumulate these industry verticals, there's quite a lot of businesses who will fall under the SOCI Act at the same time. And with that, there is an increased pressure to deploy a lot of security controls in organizations, which means that, you would not have resources and your projects would not be in the timelines that you expect. And there is a need for government to look at the global talent pool and see if they can fasten the migrations and attract some of the best talents from global talent pool to come into Australia and support us in this initiative in securing our critical infrastructure and essential services.
Great. And Rosemary?
Look, I'd say two things. The first is the message, I think, to government is we are willing to work with you. We absolutely understand as managers of, critical infrastructure assets, we are kind of nose up against the reality of the impact if those assets are not available. Whether it's an energy network or a domain name system, the consequences are very severe for the economy and for our society. So we come to the table with that awareness and appreciation of our responsibility as managers of these assets. And the offer, I think, is there absolutely to share that knowledge and to work cooperatively and constructively. So that's number one. Number two for me is very much on Gijo's point about skills. The role of government in enabling skills through short-term measures of trying to get people back into Australia, through longer-term measures through the education, apprenticeship, skill support system. I think that development of our pool of skills is an area where significant government focus could really help those of us managing critical infrastructure assets.
Great, thank you. So I'm looking at three themes here: implementation, cooperation, and skills, if I make those going ahead. And that concludes our session today. I'd like to extend my thanks to our speakers, Rosemary and Gijo, for making yourselves available to participate and for sharing your insights and experience. I'd like to again thank our live stream sponsor for today, Alda. Your ongoing support is appreciated, and we look forward to continuing this conversation in Canberra. Please take a minute before you log off Pigeonhole to provide your feedback and rank today's discussion. This discussion has been recorded and will be available shortly via your live stream link, then on the CEDA website publicly next week for you to share with your colleagues and networks. You can keep up to date and register for CEDA's programs by visiting www.ceda.com.au. In particular, the next up event is the annual State of the Nation on the 8th of September, which will focus on Australia's choices, including the themes we have discussed today. Please enjoy the rest of your day.